The moment came without drama. No shouting, no argument, no warning. Ethan Wallace stood across from her in the living room of the penthouse they had shared for 11 years, his posture calm, his voice measured, as if he were delivering an update during a quarterly board meeting. "I've filed for divorce." The words didn't echo. They didn't ring. They simply landed, heavy and absolute, sinking into the silence like a stone dropped into deep water. Claire Wallace didn't respond at first. She stood near the tall windows overlooking Midtown Manhattan, the city glowing beneath a low winter sky, her reflection faint in the glass. For a second, she thought she might have misheard him. "I'm sorry," she said finally, turning slowly. "You filed for what?" Ethan didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't look angry. He looked resolved. "I've already retained counsel," he said. "The paperwork will be delivered tomorrow." Claire searched his face for something, hesitation, guilt, even irritation, but found none. The man she had known for over a decade now wore the expression he reserved for decisions already made, consequences already calculated. "Is this a joke?" she asked, forcing a small laugh that sounded wrong even to her own ears. "No," Ethan replied. "It's overdue." The apartment was immaculate. Everything was always immaculate. The marble floors gleamed under soft recessed lighting. A framed skyline photograph hung perfectly centered above the fireplace. Claire had chosen it years ago, back when they still debated aesthetics instead of attorneys. She took a step toward him. "Overdue for who?" "For me," he said. That was when she noticed a woman standing near the kitchen island. She hadn't heard the elevator, hadn't noticed the door open. Tall, early 30s, polished in a way that suggested intention rather than taste. Her posture was relaxed, confident. Too confident for someone standing in another woman's home. The woman smiled. It wasn't apologetic. It wasn't embarrassed. It was victorious. "Claire," the woman said lightly, stepping forward. "I was hoping we could handle this amicably." Claire felt something tighten in her chest. "Who are you?" she asked, though the answer had already begun assembling itself in her mind. Ethan answered instead. "This is Madison," he said. "Madison Pierce. She's been working with me for the past year." "With you?" Claire repeated. Madison's smile didn't falter. "I oversee strategic partnerships." Of course she did. Claire looked back at Ethan. "You brought her here?" "Yes," he said. "I did want there to be confusion." Confusion. That word almost made her laugh. "How long?" she asked. Ethan hesitated just long enough to be deliberate. "That's not relevant." Madison shifted her weight, placing a hand lightly on Ethan's arm. The gesture was casual, possessive, familiar. Claire noticed it the way one notices a bruise forming, slowly, painfully, undeniably. "You filed already," Claire said. "So this was planned." "Yes." "And she knows?" Madison nodded. "Everything." Claire exhaled, steadying herself against the back of a chair. Her heart wasn't racing. It felt hollow, like something essential had been removed without anesthesia. "What exactly are you asking for?" she asked. "I'm not asking," Ethan replied. "I'm offering." He reached into his jacket and placed a slim folder on the dining table. "I've instructed my attorney to be fair," he continued. "You'll receive a settlement that reflects our circumstances." "Our circumstances?" Claire repeated quietly. "Yes." Madison glanced at the folder. "It's generous," she added. "More than generous, actually." Claire didn't touch the papers. "For 11 years," she said slowly, "I built my life around you." "I didn't ask you to do that," Ethan replied. The words were precise, clean, designed to cut without appearing cruel. She looked at him again, really looked at him, and realized something was missing. Not love, not affection, accountability. I gave up my consulting practice so you could build your firm, she said. I moved cities. I hosted your clients. I handled your family, your public image, your schedules, your... And I appreciate that, Ethan interrupted. But appreciation doesn't create entitlement. Madison nodded slightly, as if agreeing with a point in a meeting. This isn't personal, Madison said. It's just reality. Claire turned to her. You're standing in my home, she said calmly, and you're telling me what's personal. Madison's smile thinned. Legally, it's his home. That did it. Ethan didn't correct her. Every major asset is in my name, Ethan said. That was a precaution my father insisted on. Claire felt the room tilt. So I get nothing. You get what's outlined, he replied. A cash settlement and the Aspen condo. The one that's still under mortgage? Claire asked. Yes. And after taxes? Ethan shrugged. You'll be fine. Madison stepped closer, lowering her voice slightly. You haven't worked in years, Claire. This gives you security. Security. Claire straightened. You planned this, she said. You waited until everything was untouchable. Ethan didn't deny it. I built this company, he said. I'm not dismantling it out of guilt. Silence settled over the room. Not awkward silence. Not stunned silence. The kind that signals something irreversible has just occurred. Claire looked down at the folder. Didn't open it. Instead, she picked it up and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Ethan asked. To leave, she said. Madison blinked. You're not even going to review the offer? Claire paused, turning just enough to meet Ethan's eyes. No, she said. I don't negotiate while bleeding. She walked out. That night, Claire slept on a friend's couch in Brooklyn, staring at the ceiling long after the city outside went quiet. Her phone buzzed once, an automated confirmation of delivery schedule for the morning. She didn't cry. Not yet. Her mind replayed moments instead. Not arguments. Not betrayals. Small things. The night she signed the prenuptial agreement, rushed between flights, smiling because she trusted him. She hadn't questioned the language, hadn't read the clauses closely. Just signed. The memory surfaced briefly, then faded. She turned onto her side, closing her eyes. By morning, the documents arrived. Thick, formal, immaculate. The numbers were clinical, the language sterile, the tone final. It was all there in black and white. She would walk away with a fraction of what they'd built together. No claim to equity. No claim to future earnings. No acknowledgement of contribution beyond spousal support framed as generosity. Her friend Lena read silently, jaw tightening. He's erasing you, Lena said finally. Claire stared at the table. He thinks he already has. Do you have a lawyer? Claire shook her head. Not one who can touch his. Then you need one. Claire said nothing. She already knew who Ethan's lawyer was. Richard Caldwell. Aggressive. Expensive. Known for breaking people down until settlement felt like mercy. She felt small for the first time. Not weak. Small. That afternoon, alone again, Claire scrolled through old photos on her phone. Events, fundraisers, trips she had planned but never appeared in publicly. In one picture. Taken years ago at a quiet family gathering in Northern California, a man stood slightly apart from the group. Tall, gray at the temples, hands clasped behind his back. Her uncle, Daniel Whitaker. She hadn't seen him in years. Not really. He had attended her wedding briefly, spoken politely, left early. Ethan had called him reserved, academic, harmless. Her mother had called him something else. If you're ever truly in trouble, she had said once, not long before she passed, the kind where pride will cost you everything, call Daniel. Claire had laughed then. Now she didn't. Her thumb hovered over contact. She hesitated. Then she pressed call. The line rang twice. Daniel Whitaker. The voice was calm, measured, unhurried. Uncle Daniel. Claire said, "It's Claire." A pause. "I know," he replied. "You don't call unless something's wrong." The dam didn't break. Not yet. But for the first time since the night before, Claire felt something shift. Not hope, not relief, possibility. Claire did not sleep. Not because she was crying, because her mind wouldn't stop recalculating. The night replayed itself in fragments. The way Ethan spoke without raising his voice, the way Madison stood, as if she had already moved in, the way the word generous had been used like an insult disguised as kindness. By morning, the shock had hardened into something quieter. Focus. At exactly 9 a.m., a black sedan waited at the curb outside Lena's apartment. It didn't idle impatiently. It didn't honk. It simply existed. The driver stepped out when Claire approached. Mid-40s, broad shoulders. No smile, no introduction. He opened the rear door and nodded once. Claire hesitated for half a second. Then she got in. The interior was silent. Not the awkward silence of strangers, but the practiced silence of systems that didn't need reassurance. As the car pulled into traffic, Claire watched the city move past her window. Brooklyn gave way to the bridge. The bridge gave way to Manhattan. Manhattan shifted neighborhoods without announcement. She realized she had no idea where she was going. For the first time since Ethan spoke the word divorce, that didn't scare her. The car stopped in front of a brownstone on the Upper East Side. No signage, no name, no visible business. Just an old building with a door that looked like it had never been forced. The driver opened her door. "Inside," he said quietly. Claire stepped out. The door opened before she knocked. A woman in a tailored gray suit stood there, already moving aside. "Ms. Wallace," she said. "This way." Inside, the air changed. Not warmer, not colder, quieter. The walls were lined with books, real ones, worn spines, no decorative shelving. The floors were dark wood. The lighting was low but precise. No one rushed. No one looked surprised to see her. They walked past rooms where people worked without speaking loudly, without looking up. Screens glowed. Papers were stacked. Phones sat face down. This wasn't a place where things were decided. This was where they were executed. The woman stopped at a study at the back of the building and opened the door. "He's waiting," she said. Claire stepped inside. Daniel Whitaker stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. He did not turn immediately. "Sit," he said. Claire sat. Only then did he turn around. Age had sharpened him. His hair was gray at the temples. His posture relaxed in the way of someone who didn't need to prove he belonged where he stood. He looked at her once. Then he said, "I'm sorry." The words were calm. Finished. Claire swallowed. "I didn't know who else to call," she said. "That's why you called me," Daniel replied. She slid the divorce documents onto the desk. He didn't open them right away. Instead, he asked, "Did you sign anything?" "No." "Good." Then he opened the folder. He scanned, page by page. No expression. When he finished, he closed it, stood, and dropped it into the wastebasket. Claire inhaled sharply. "Uncle Daniel, that offer is meaningless," he said. "It exists to make you doubt yourself." She stared at the trash bin. "They said I don't have leverage," she said. Daniel met her eyes. "They are mistaken." He pulled a thin folder from his desk and placed it in front of her. It already had her name on it, not handwritten. Typed. Claire's chest tightened. "What is that?" "Context," Daniel said. She opened it. Inside were pages she didn't recognize, corporate structures, entity names, transaction timelines. And one photograph. Ethan, stepping out of a building in Grand Cayman. Claire's fingers went cold. "I called you last night," she said quietly. "How is this possible?" Daniel did not answer directly. When people believe they are untouchable, he said, they leave patterns. Claire looked up at him. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Ethan believes he controls the system," he continued. "He believes lawyers are shields and money is armor." Claire's throat tightened. "He also believes you're alone," Daniel said. "That is his mistake." Silence settled between them. Not heavy, not awkward, certain. "What happens now?" Claire asked. Daniel didn't rush to answer. "What happens now," he said, "is that you stop reacting." He stood again, poured water into a glass, and placed it in front of her. "You will not contact Ethan," he continued. "You will not respond to his attorney. You will not explain yourself to anyone." Claire nodded. "They will grow comfortable," Daniel said. "Comfort makes people careless." She felt something click into place. "And you?" she asked. Daniel's expression didn't change. "I will listen," he said, "and I will wait." "For what?" "For the moment when telling the truth becomes unavoidable." Claire looked down at the folder in her hands, then back at him. "They think they already won," she said. Daniel nodded once. "Yes," he said, "that is the most useful belief an enemy can have." Claire leaned back in the chair. For the first time since Ethan spoke, her pulse slowed, not because the pain was gone, but because the outcome no longer felt uncertain. Ethan Wallace felt lighter. The apartment felt bigger, without Claire's presence. Cleaner, sharper, efficient in the way he liked things to be. Madison moved through the space as if it had always been hers, placing her laptop on the kitchen island, swapping out artwork Claire had chosen for something abstract and expensive-looking. She didn't ask permission. She didn't need to. That pleased Ethan. By Monday afternoon, the divorce had already become background noise, a procedural inconvenience, something his attorney would handle while he focused on real matters. The merger, that was where his attention belonged. Wallace Capital was finalizing a high-profile acquisition in the tech sector. Quietly, aggressively, with the kind of numbers that turned managing partners into legends. The deal was airtight. Investors were confident. Regulators were bored. Everything was exactly where it needed to be, which was why Ethan didn't notice the first shift. It was subtle. A delayed email, a rescheduled call, an assistant hesitating before answering a question she normally would have anticipated. Nothing alarming, just friction. He chalked it up to end-of-quarter fatigue. At the same time, in a building no one associated with Wallace Capital, Daniel Whitaker's team was already working. Not aggressively, not urgently, precisely. They didn't subpoena first. They didn't threaten. They didn't announce themselves. They listened. Financial systems speak. If you let them, they whisper through timestamps, transaction overlaps, quiet inconsistencies that only exist when someone assumes no one is looking closely enough. Daniel sat at the head of a long table in a room with no windows. Around him were people who did not introduce themselves by title. They didn't need to. Screens displayed transaction maps, money flowing through shell entities like blood through capillaries. Slow, hidden, purposeful. His confidence is structural. One of them said calmly. He believes separation equals safety. Daniel nodded once. "Which means," another added, "he's sloppy where he thinks he's invisible." No one smiled. This was not exciting work. It was methodical. Back in Manhattan, Ethan met with his attorney, Richard Caldwell, over lunch at a private club overlooking Central Park. Richard flipped through a slim folder, unconcerned. "She hasn't responded," he said. which is good. Ethan nodded. She won't. She'll hire someone eventually, Richard continued. Probably a mid-tier matrimonial firm. They'll posture, request disclosures, make noise. And then, Ethan asked, and then, Richard said with a small smile, we settle. You give her a little more. She feels heard. It goes away. Ethan lifted his glass. Efficient. Richard hesitated. One thing. Ethan raised an eyebrow. She retained counsel, Richard said. Late Friday. Ethan shrugged. Of course she did. Richard tapped the folder. Name's Daniel Whitaker. Ethan frowned. Never heard of him. Neither have I, Richard said, which is good. Why? Because unknown lawyers don't have leverage, Richard replied. They have opinions. Ethan leaned back. So what's he asking for? Preliminary disclosures, Richard said. Standard language. Ethan laughed. Send him the standard packet. That's the plan. Richard paused and added, he didn't request a meeting. Why would he? Ethan said, he's fishing. Richard nodded, reassured by the familiarity of the pattern. Neither man noticed that Richard's junior associate hadn't spoken once during the lunch, hadn't touched his food, hadn't stopped staring at the name on the letterhead. Claire spent the week doing nothing, which, she learned, was not the same as being idle. Daniel had instructed her not to make calls, not to explain herself, not to correct assumptions. They are watching your reaction, he had said. Starve them. So she waited. She stayed with Lena, took long walks, let the city blur. Occasionally, Daniel's office sent her short requests, dates, old emails, names of people she had once introduced to Ethan. Nothing dramatic, nothing urgent, but each question sharpened her memory. She began to see her marriage differently, not as a sacrifice, but as infrastructure. She had been a system he relied on, then erased. That realization didn't make her angry. It made her steady. On Thursday afternoon, Daniel called. One sentence. They've responded. That was it. No tone shift. No emphasis. Just information. Later that night, Ethan received an email. Nothing threatening. Nothing accusatory. Just a request for clarification on several entities he hadn't listed. He smiled when he read it. Already? Madison asked, looking up from her screen. Yes, Ethan said. They always overreach. Should I be worried? She asked lightly. Ethan shook his head. No, this is the part where they pretend they matter. He replied with confidence, attaching prepared disclosures. He hit send without rereading them. Across the city, in a quiet room filled with screens, Daniel Whitaker watched the files arrive. He didn't open them immediately. He waited. Then he said, almost to himself, Good. One of the analysts looked up. They sent incomplete records. Yes, Daniel replied. On purpose. Should we respond? Daniel shook his head. Not yet, he said. Let him get comfortable. He stood, closing the folder in front of him. The most effective pressure, he added, is the kind that hasn't announced itself. Ethan went to sleep that night believing the situation was under control, which meant he slept deeply. That mattered. The deposition room was designed to make people nervous. Neutral colors, flat lighting, chairs just uncomfortable enough to remind you that time mattered. A single camera mounted high in the corner, its red light steady and indifferent. Ethan Wallace walked in smiling. He wore a navy suit tailored within an inch of its life. Cufflinks understated, watch expensive but not loud. He looked like a man who had done this before, and one, Richard Caldwell, followed, relaxed, confident, already glancing at his phone as if the outcome were a formality. Claire was already seated on the opposite side of the table. She didn't stand when Ethan entered. She didn't avert her eyes. She looked different, not triumphant, not emotional. Still, her hair was pulled back cleanly, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. Beside her sat a young man Ethan didn't recognize. Mid-30s, plain suit, no visible ego. Richard leaned toward Ethan. "Junior associate," he murmured. "That's their lead." Ethan almost laughed. The court reporter began the formalities. Ethan was sworn in. His voice was steady. The questions started predictably. Background, education, firm history. Ethan answered smoothly, occasionally glancing toward Richard for affirmation. An hour passed. Nothing happened. Ethan relaxed. Then the questions shifted. "Mr. Wallace," the young attorney said calmly, "can you list all entities in which you currently hold controlling interest?" Ethan did. Domestic firms, public investments, trusts already disclosed. "And that is complete?" the attorney asked. "Yes," Ethan said. "That's everything." The attorney paused. "You are under oath," he said. "I want to give you an opportunity to amend that statement." Ethan frowned slightly. "I'm certain." The door opened. No announcement. No apology. Daniel Whitaker entered the room and took a seat against the far wall, just within Ethan's line of sight. He didn't introduce himself, didn't speak. He opened a thin folder and began reading. Ethan's rhythm faltered. He glanced at Richard. Richard shrugged, irritated but unconcerned. The questioning resumed. "Mr. Wallace," the attorney said, "were you in Grand Cayman on May 12th of last year?" Ethan stiffened. "Yes." "Vacation?" Daniel turned a page. "Did that vacation include a visit to Triton Holdings?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't recall." The attorney slid a document across the table. A photograph, high resolution, time-stamped. Ethan exiting a building in Georgetown, briefcase in hand. Silence. Richard stood abruptly. "Objection. This is harassment." Daniel looked up for the first time. "Please note for the record," he said calmly, "that counsel is objecting to a document his client personally signed into existence." Richard froze. The young attorney continued. "Mr. Wallace, Triton Holdings is registered in your name. Why was it omitted from your disclosures?" Ethan swallowed. Daniel closed his folder with a soft click. That sound carried. "Mr. Wallace," Daniel said, his voice even, "lying under oath is perjury." Ethan looked at Richard. Richard did not look back. "Before we proceed," Daniel continued, "you may amend your testimony." Ethan's confidence cracked. Then Daniel leaned forward. "Let's move on," he said, "to the pending merger." The attorney placed another document on the table. Transaction maps, flowcharts, numbers that told a story Ethan had never intended to be told out loud. Money cycling through shell entities. Stock values artificially inflated. Timing too precise to be coincidence. This resembled securities fraud. The attorney said neutrally, "A felony." The room went silent. This was no longer a divorce proceeding. This was exposure. Daniel leaned back slightly. "We are here," he said, "to discuss equitable division of marital assets. However, given the circumstances, I find myself feeling generous." Ethan's hands trembled. "So," Daniel continued, "let us set aside the Securities and Exchange Commission for now." Richard's face had gone pale. "We can talk settlement," Daniel said, "or we can let the institutions do what institutions do." He glanced at the camera. "We have time." Ethan stared at the table. The arrogance was gone. So was the smile. Ethan Wallace did not speak for a long time. The deposition room felt smaller now, the air heavier. The camera's red light no longer indifferent, now accusatory. Richard Caldwell cleared his throat. "We'll need a recess," he said. Daniel Whitaker didn't object. He didn't agree either. He simply closed his folder and stood. 10 minutes, he said. No calls. The words were not a request. Ethan remained seated as Daniel left the room. His fingers rested flat on the table, spread as if grounding himself. Madison wasn't there. For the first time since the divorce, that absence mattered. Richard leaned in. "Listen to me," he whispered. "We can still manage this." Ethan didn't respond. "They don't have proof of intent," Richard continued. "At worst, this becomes a disclosure dispute." Ethan finally looked up. "You said this was nothing." "It was nothing," Richard said sharply, "until he walked in." "Who is he?" Ethan asked. Richard hesitated. That hesitation did damage. "I don't know," Richard admitted. "And that's the problem." The door opened again. Daniel returned alone. No associates. No stack of papers. Just himself. He sat, folded his hands, and waited. The silence stretched. Then Daniel spoke. "I'm going to explain something once," he said. "Not because you deserve clarity. Because efficiency demands it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You built Wallace Capital on speed," Daniel continued. "You exploited gaps between oversight and execution. You assumed regulators move slowly." He leaned forward slightly. "They do," he said. "People don't." Daniel slid a single page across the table. It wasn't legal language. It was a timeline. Dates. Transfers. Meetings. Names. At the bottom was a projected outcome. Civil penalties. Criminal referral. Asset freeze. Ethan's breath caught. "This isn't filed," Daniel said. "Yet." Richard leaned forward, voice tight. "What do you want?" Daniel didn't look at him. "I want this divorce concluded," Daniel said. "Completely." He turned his gaze to Ethan. "I want full asset disclosure," he continued. "Onshore and offshore. I want retroactive valuation of Wallace Capital from inception. I want compensatory recognition of marital contribution." Richard's voice cracked. "That's excessive." Daniel finally looked at him. "No," he said calmly. "This is restraint." Ethan swallowed. "And if I refuse?" Daniel leaned back. "Then this becomes documentation," he said, "not negotiation." Silence returned. Ethan stared at the timeline again. He saw the future clearly now. Not prison. Not headlines. Erasure. The kind that doesn't trend because it happens quietly, professionally, completely. "What happens to Madison?" Ethan asked suddenly. Daniel didn't answer right away. "She is not my concern," he said, "but she is part of the record." Ethan closed his eyes. That was the moment. Not when the fraud was named. Not when the money was mapped. When he realized the woman he left Claire for would not stand next to him when the system turned. Daniel stood. "You have 48 hours, he said. "After that, I stopped managing outcomes." He looked at Claire. She had not spoken once during the entire exchange. She didn't smile, didn't nod. She simply met Ethan's eyes. For the first time since the night he said, "I filed for divorce," Ethan looked away. Outside, Claire breathed in cold air she hadn't realized she was holding. Daniel walked beside her in silence. At the curb, he stopped. "This part is important," he said quietly. "There will be moments where he tries to regain dignity." Claire nodded. "Do not give it to him," Daniel continued. "Dignity must be earned after consequences." She swallowed. "What happens after?" Daniel opened the car door for her. "After," he said, "is quiet." Claire got in. The door closed. For the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt finished. Ethan Wallace signed the settlement at 3:12 a.m. Not because he wanted to, because the alternative had stopped being abstract. The conference room was empty except for him. Richard Caldwell, and a junior partner who hadn't slept. Coffee sat untouched. The city outside the windows was dark, quiet, indifferent. The numbers on the page were final. Full asset disclosure. Reclassification of marital contributions. Equitable division tied to historical valuation, not current optics. Wallace Capital would survive. Ethan would not. At least not in the way he understood survival. Richard watched him sign without comment. There was nothing left to advise. No clever framing. No procedural delay that could change the math. When the last signature dried, Richard closed the folder. "It's done," he said. Ethan nodded. He did not feel relief. He felt smaller. Claire received the call later that morning. Daniel's voice. Even. Controlled. "It's concluded," he said. No congratulations. No victory speech. Just fact. Claire sat on the edge of the bed in Lena's apartment, sunlight cutting across the floor. For a moment, she said nothing. "Thank you," she finally said. Daniel paused. "You handled yourself correctly," he replied. "That matters." The line went quiet, then ended. Madison Pierce read about the settlement 2 days later. Not in the news. In an internal memo. Her name appeared once, attached to a compliance inquiry. Her role under review. Her future uncertain. She did not call Ethan. Neither did he call her. Some connections don't survive scrutiny. Wallace Capital announced a restructuring the following quarter. Ethan stepped down as managing partner to pursue personal interests. No scandal. No apology. Just disappearance. Investors adjusted. The firm rebranded. The system absorbed the damage and kept moving. It always does. Claire moved back into the city slowly. Not into the penthouse. Some spaces don't need reclaiming. She took a small office in Soho. Quiet. Brick walls. Light in the afternoon. She reopened her consulting practice under her own name. Clients followed. Not loudly, but steadily. On her desk sat a single object, the pen Ethan used to sign the settlement. Daniel had handed it to her, without explanation. She didn't display it. She didn't throw it away. She kept it in a drawer. Some things are reminders, not trophies. One evening, months later, Claire walked past a building where Wallace Capital once held its most exclusive events. The lights were on, different faces inside. Different names on the door. She didn't stop. The city kept moving. So, did she? Justice didn't roar. It concluded, and then it let the world continue.